From the Toronto Star, I'm Adrian Chung, and this matters. A year after they were supposed to start, the biggest event in the world, the Olympics, are back. The torch relay has begun in Japan. The International Olympic Committee is making up for lost time after the Tokyo Summer Games, scheduled for 2020, were postponed, the first time that's ever happened. The pandemic continues, but so does the push to stage the Summer Games this year. The IOC and Japan says they're happening. Full disclosure, I'll be there covering the games for the Olympic Broadcasting Services. More than 10,000 athletes, staff, and media from all over the world descend on one place in a pandemic. How do you pull that off safely? And can the Olympics be the global celebration it usually is when we could all really use one? On This Matters, we're talking to Marnie McBean, chef de mission of Team Canada, 4-time Olympic medal winner in rowing, 3 of them golds, by the way.
McBean and Heddle going for the medal, trying to roll their way into history.
We'll talk about leading the Canadian delegation into Tokyo, the mindset and safety of the athletes in a complicated year, and what success means in a different kind of Olympics. Marnie, thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to meet you.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Adrian.
The Tokyo Games are your 10th Olympic Games, which is just an incredible number. You're leading the Canadian delegation as chef de mission, especially with the postponement of last year. I bet you're just raring to go this summer.
I'm always raring to go before an Olympics. And you say 10 Olympics and everyone thinks 10 by 4. There's been some Winter Olympics in there, so it's not a 40-year stint. It's still pretty long. But yeah, there's always a build up to the Olympics. And we're about 120 days out now, like give or take a few days. And it's always kind of this weird time. It's always a transition time between this volume and intensity of work and competition. Right now we're missing competition. But it's like this switch in our heads that's going from the Olympics are so far away. There's like just so much time to prepare to they're coming, right? And it's kind of like that chomping at the bit kind of thing where you're like, yeah, tickets are getting booked and you're like, there's a clarity of what's going to happen. So yeah, I'm getting super pumped.
Yeah, I can imagine the days end up being a bit of a blur with everything going on. How do you see your role as chef de mission? I mean, you've done a lot of work in terms of mentoring athletes. How do you help them be at the top of their game mentally?
Sometimes as chef de mission and at many games, I've been a lead mentor. And the role is you're either a mentor or a mascot. Not everybody is looking for mentoring, right? Not everybody is looking for advice on the path they're on because the entire team we're working with is like, they're the best in our country at what they do, and they're working on being the best in the world at what they do. So my role as chef is to put the mentoring advice out there, is to be part mascot. And in this games, uniquely, it's been sort of a team bonding agent a little bit because like every Canadian and almost everybody around the world who got sent home, it's been a very isolating year. And all the training that's been done has been uniquely done in isolation, right? Usually training involves competition, which means coming together with somebody and testing. And we've missed a lot of that over the last year. And so this year, through the communications I've done and talking with the team, it's sort of been this bonding agent that helps all of our team. And Team Canada is more than the athletes. It's the coaches. It's all the very talented and dedicated support services, whether it's physios, massage, nutritionists, psychologists, the admin, the logistics. Like there's a huge army of people that help we figure it'll be over 400 athletes at the games. It's a massive group. And so I think my role has been reminding people we are part of a group. We are part of a team. We focused our efforts on being part of Team Canada, the 37 million Team Canada when we called it over a year ago. And we also need to remind that we're part of a smaller, I say this humbly, elite group that are preparing for an Olympic Games still.
What has that preparation been like? Because obviously preparation and timing and the logistics of the team is always so important in every games. Now there's the uncertainty of the pandemic thrown in. What has that process been like over the past year?
The funny thing about it is is the preparation is actually focused on preparation and not competition. I remember having my eyes opened when I started talking to NHL players and stuff like that, over the course of the season, they're actually detraining because it is not possible to be getting stronger. And yes, they get game ready, but they're not getting fitter throughout the season. They get stronger and fitter in the off season. And Olympic athletes, as much as the world comes and watches them for 16 days every 4 years, they have competition seasons throughout the year. They're training 12 months a year at the highest level, and they're traveling all around the world. And it sometimes is hard to prepare. And so one of the things we've seen is the creativity and the back to basics that we've seen for a lot of our athletes, and our coaches have had to be just magicians for, tapping into their creative selves and figuring out how to get the most out of whatever was available to them. Like everyone, if you're training in your living room or you're training in your park or your backyard or whatever it's going to be. But the preparation that many of our athletes and teams have been able to do is kind of a back to basics. It's a back to joy. Sport is our work. It's our career. And like everything, sometimes you get stuck thinking that work is the grind and you forget that you actually really like what you're doing. And when it's taken away from you, we had, swimmers and divers and artistic swimmers, for example, who couldn't get into the pool for over 100 days. And they're like, I really miss it. Like I really miss swimming. And so we've brought back joy and we've brought preparation. And people have really been able to up their game with whether it's core strength or injury rehab, strategy, tactics, technique. I think the preparation that we're going to have for these Olympics, coupled with the fact that the perspective of what's really important this year has been really laid at our feet, I think there's a potential for the Olympic performances to be extraordinary when we start getting to the field of play in Tokyo.
Right. It's almost taking a step back and realizing, wow, you have this opportunity and the work is the joy.
Absolutely. One of the things we've always seen historically is, if you take Olympic swimming, for example, the volume and intensity of training that goes into the preparation for the Olympics is by far the highest, right? Like nobody trains more in a post-Olympic year. But I do know that swimming has a world championships or historically has a world championships in a post-Olympic year. And yet that's where all the world best times are because the pressure is off. And that's really when they get to reap the benefits of all the work that they've done, and not because there's been an extra year, because I don't believe that's the issue. I think it's just taking the tension off. And I think there's going to be people who put their feet on a field or, a competition surface, and they're just going to be so joyful to be there, so happy to see their competitors from around the world, finally like, we're here and we made it. And now let's just do this thing that we really love to do and we're actually really great at.
We'll be right back. In terms of the organizing level, the Canadian Olympic Committee really led the way last year at the beginning of the pandemic, being the first delegation in the world to say, listen, we're not sending Canadian athletes to the games in 2020. And that sort of opened the door for other countries to do the same when there were a lot of concerns around that.
The Canadian Olympic Committee released a statement. Instead, they are urgently calling on the IOC to postpone the Games for 1 year.
So we know that safety is at the top of mind for the COC. What kinds of conversations have been happening at that level then about ensuring the safety at the Games?
Well, that wasn't a race we were trying to win. We felt that the IOC was going to make a decision about postponement, and we just in talking with our athletes council, our senior leadership, our chief medical officer, that it was just the right decision to make at the time. And I think what we did there was we indicated to our team, to our athletes, our coaches, as I said, everybody, that we are world leading more than on the field of play. We are world leading in our preparation and our reading of the situation. And so I think as we've gone forward with our preparation over the year, we've stayed that way. Like we've continued to be world leading and proactive on plans that we're making. And so, for example, the Tokyo Organizing Committee and the IOC announced that international friends and family weren't going to be permitted at the Games. This wasn't news to our team because this is something we've been talking about with them. I think I was bringing up as early as October, and then definitely in a message to our team in December, I was like, this is a conversation you need to start having with your family. And I don't come up with these ideas out of the blue, but I knew that it was something like we are proactively anticipating what is going to be in the best interest interest of sport and performance to make a safe and successful Olympic Games happening. So we've consistently shown that our planning and our preparation is on point, and we are anticipating versus accepting the changes and challenge that come to us. And I think that's the high performance environment, right? As the secret to high performance is to anticipate change and challenge and not to merely accept it.
Right. That's part of the preparation of mentally being there and almost seeing where the curves are before they arrive in the road.
Yeah, it's an old analogy, but I like to think of it like, when you're in the Matrix, you can see everything coming at you in slow motion because you're ready for it. You can kind of slow down the speed of things. And so that kind of thing, we have indicated to our team that our planning and preparation is on point and is dedicated. As always, our top priorities have always been the health and safety of Team Canada and their high performance at the Games in the Olympic environment. And I think they're trusting us. There's a lot of trust in the communication that we're giving with our national sports organizations. We just had a webinar with them communicating details that we get from the organizing committee, and they convey that information. Sometimes it's a bit more operational and logistical that needs to go down to the athletes, but we also have communications with our athletes, and it's cliche, but information is power. And we're trying to make sure that our athletes are informed. It is their path. This is their story. This will be their Olympics. They are the key stakeholder in this whole plan.
Even from the view of one delegation, you mentioned the logistics of pulling this off. Is this the most challenging games maybe ever?
Yeah. But, the joke about the Olympics, it was always, these are the best games ever. And they just say it every 2 years, right? So yeah, absolutely. These would have been anyways, because they're the 2020 games, and maybe the 2022 games would have raised the bar. It is actually still challenging for our colleagues who are looking now only a year ahead to Beijing. But yeah, everything we're seeing in the news today, how, cargo ships are getting stuck in port. We don't actually use the Suez Canal, but all the ports around the world are a little bit backed up. So some of our logistics and our shipping is being done through air freight instead of by ship. How things are moving around the world. Also, because we have two games in such a tight frame, like as an organization, the Canadian Olympic team is trying to figure out how do you do all your shipping and logistics for games that are now within 6 months of each other. So there's a lot of things that are going to be, now it's quite easy. It's like only 6 months where you take some of the things that we have in the services and supplies, whether it's medical or, athlete care and comfort, they'll move from Tokyo towards Beijing. But yeah, it's very complicated and how we do things. And I'm sorry, I'm going on with a long answer, but it's also because in keeping everyone safe, we are trimming back our mission team. So the number of staff and volunteers that we will have on the ground in Tokyo. So usually you have this huge army of people who help when the athletes and the teams come through and they arrive in the host city to get their gear, right? So, we'll have fewer people in outfitting. We'll have fewer touch points. I don't get to go and welcome the athletes personally because we're going to minimize our close contacts. So yes, I think maybe I said to this before we started, but I think everyone needs to have a t-shirt that just says, yes, it's complicated, because everyone's life, everyone's role over the last year has been complicated. And it's like, resilience. So that was so 2020.
Have you made peace with how different the games will look and sound this time around? You've been to so many games. You feel the energy from people all over the world being there. Like, we don't know fully what it will look and sound like yet, but it will be different. Have you almost adjusted to that mindset?
100%. As much as I've been to many Olympics, I've never been to the same Olympics. And so that's one of the big pieces of advice I give to the team is it's going to be different. No matter what, you don't know Tokyo. And so that was part of the advice over a year ago kind of thing. But the one thing I do say, there's a difference. Like at the Olympics, there's the Olympic Games, which maybe when you close your eyes and you think about the Olympic Games, you think about celebrations and parties and the opening ceremony and a medal ceremony and the fans in the stands and stuff like that. But when an athlete closes their eyes and thinks about the Olympics, they're thinking about the field of play, the start line, the rowing course. I was a rower, the rowing course, its location, the winds, even the water mineralization. Like I'm thinking about the field of play. Yeah, I've been to Olympics that have been gong shows. Like, famously in Greece, they were still rolling out grass like 1 week into the games. They weren't ready, right? Like, Atlanta had its own issues. It was almost like the separation of the inside and the outside. And the Olympic field of play. So the athletes and our teams, they're preparing for the Olympic competition. And that is always extraordinary. No matter where you go, no matter what Olympics have been, Sochi, Rio, Athens, the Olympic field of play, they're always amazing and they're always ready. And that's what we're focusing on. And that's the messaging now, is to focus on that. And we would love and we will miss our friends and families in the stands, but we don't need them in the stands to know that they love us and they support us and they have our back. And, Team Canada, the 37 million that we've been part of for this last year, as we've been staying at home and isolating and wearing a mask and washing our hands and doing everything that every Canadian's being asked to do, we can only hope that they will have our back now. They've never had to be in the stands for us. We've just always sort of gotten their vibe and their cheer.
I saw in an interview where you said that while a lot of people count down towards the opening ceremony, you actually count down towards the closing ceremony at the end of the games. At the end of the Tokyo Games, in your mind, what will count as a successful Olympics for Team Canada?
Well, obviously that we got to the end of the Tokyo Games, that everybody got to compete. It's going to be weird, right? Like if you think about how you even would celebrate that you finished your competition, that you don't get to linger in the host city and go out and celebrate in Tokyo. People are being told through the playbook that they have to go home, with the 24 to 48 hours after they've been eliminated from competition, and elimination could be the podium. But I think that the success, the healthy and safe completion of competition. Like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine I'm not going to sit down with like a big poof, like, oh my gosh, we made it. And a lot of high fives.
We did it.
Yeah. Like, honestly, we isn't just the team and the athletes and our logistics. We is everybody. Like, it's a global we, right? So hopefully there's going to be this sense when people are watching this on their screens that we're coming through, right? That more and more people around the world are getting vaccines in their arms. More and more nations have access to that vaccine, because we are an event that represents 205 nations around the world. If one nation is heavily vaccinated, another nation might not have even started their rollout in July. That's why we're going to these games, not anticipating that. The success is going to be just that it's going to happen, and that the athletes and everyone who sacrificed so much, and I don't think athletes are alone in sacrificing when I say that. I know everyone is sacrificing, but I'm talking about this particular community, that everyone has sacrificed so much, and they got to test what they'd been working against an international field at the highest level.
Marnie, good luck at the games. I know that even though Canadians can't physically be there, they'll be at home cheering on Team Canada. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for the conversation.
And that is Marnie McBean, former Olympian and current chef de mission of Team Canada for the Tokyo Summer Games. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Adrian Chung, Saba Aitazaz, and Raju Muthar. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattinen, and our director of programming is JP Fozo. Our show theme music is by So Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.